Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Just when you thought that you've seen it all, just when you thought that it couldn't get any crazier or any more politically extreme than the nutcases in the squad in the Progressive Caucus, Washington and Oregon come in with a very simple statement: hold my beer, you haven't seen anything yet. Not too long ago, we were covering the Antifa candidate for mayor, someone who was unironically running for mayor of Portland as an Antifa candidate, representing the leftist extremist group Antifa. And just when you thought you've seen it all, we now have a Washington state congressional candidate who is actually endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America and is allied with Antifa, running with one of the most ridiculous platforms I have ever seen. Get this, folks, the main theme and the main pitch of her campaign, her main campaign message, is a call for homeless people to break into vacant homes because, you know, equity or something. Folks, once again, we have more proof that government or government roles, government positions, don't exactly attract the best and the brightest. Let me show you guys what's going on here. Let's break down all of these ridiculous talking points that are coming from some of these DSA candidates, these Democratic Socialists of America candidates. We've got some stuff to get into, but of course, before we get into any of it, please make sure to leave a like, a comment, subscribe, share the video as much as possible, and with that out of the way, let's roll the tape. Alright folks, take a look at this. Antifa allied Democrat says the homeless should break into homes and occupy them to fight homelessness. Parsons, she said in her campaign video, F that, then grabbed a bolt cutter and cut through a fence around a home which had been foreclosed on by a bank and moved in. Washington state congressional candidate Rebecca Parson, who was endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America, suggests in a campaign ad that 1 million people living in the US should break into empty homes and live in them in order to get Congress to pass housing legislation. Parson, running as a Democrat to represent Washington's 6th congressional district, said in the video ad that while sleeping in her car, she did what she was supposed to in order to fight for change, which included attending protests, writing letters, and making phone calls, but failed to accomplish anything. Let me play you some of the parts of her campaign ad. We can't exactly play most of it because there's copyright music on top of it. I'll try to edit out as best as I can. We'll see what we can do, but let's just focus on the parts that don't have copyright music, at least to start off. Rebecca Parsons starts off with this.
Warning this week that housing prices are becoming unhinged from fundamentals. The market norm.
You feel it, I feel it, we're on the edge of collapse. The corporate elite tell us not to worry, but what has doing what they told us ever gotten us? I did what they told me. I went to college, I got a master's degree, I ended up living in my car.
And so here's where we get to an interesting point. Now, when it comes to these left-wing ideologues, a lot of the problems I agree with. You know, these self-righteous, pseudo-intellectual liberals, they think they're on another plane of enlightenment. Oh, the corporate elite and Wall Street and all these problems. They think that they're the only people who are able to see these clear issues of systemic corruption in our society. But what they don't seem to understand is that literally everybody sees that. It doesn't make you special. You don't have this unattainable knowledge that only you are able to grasp to see the most basic issues in human society. We see them too. The only difference is we're not running around with half-baked solutions and half-baked ideas that aren't grounded in reality at all, that make absolutely no sense. These ridiculous idealistic solutions, of course in quotation marks, to the world's complex issues. And that's basically my main issue with these far leftoids. We've got a housing crisis. Yeah, I agree. Then the far lefty continues to speak and the whole thing falls apart. Everyone should have a house. In a country as rich as this, nobody should be living on the street. And then you pretty much just lost me. That's not a solution. Big government money printers is not a solution to these complex problems, and especially not homelessness. I mean, most of the people living on the street have severe mental issues or serious drug addiction mixed in with previous trauma and severe mental issues. This idea that you could just solve homelessness through government action is ridiculous. In fact, the answer in a lot of cases is actually less government action. The entire problem is government. We have big government Democrats, people who are aligning themselves with the Democrat Party, talking about this absurd housing crisis that we're currently experiencing. Where do you think that comes from? Where is the inflation and the jump in housing prices truly coming from? Was it evil Mitch McConnell and the Republican Party? Partly, yes, I'm not gonna lie, it is, but mostly it's Democrat fiscal policy, and especially big government response to the COVID pandemic. You know, we'd probably be better off if we didn't have a government at all. I mean, I'm sounding like a libertarian, but you know what? It's true. They told us to listen to them and obey their orders. They're gonna save us from this terrible disease, and then what'd we get? Crippling inflation, a terrible economy, on the verge of a major recession. People got $600 and $1,400 checks, and then fast forward 2 years later, people can't afford eggs and bacon. Big government screwed you. And so it's ironic to have this Democrat proposing all of these ridiculous left-wing ideas. Jesse Waters actually interviewed this individual and went through her entire platform.
Parsons says she's actually occupied empty buildings before, like houses going into foreclosure. And she's instructed homeless people to occupy businesses too, like the Fife Motel in 2020, where they refused to leave or pay after the first night. Some of her other plans she wants to enact if she's elected are to raise the minimum wage to $30 an hour, abolish ICE, because the current immigration system is, quote, a combination of systemic racism, the prison industrial complex, and corporate greed. She also wants to repeal federal laws that stop unlawful entry and re-entry of migrants, end cash bail, have a one-time cancellation of all student debt, and pass the Green New Deal.
And right there, you can see just how ironic this is. This left-wing activist, this incredible critical thinker, fiscal and social policy genius, who's supposedly angry at cost of living, cost of housing, and inflationary pressures, is calling to increase the minimum wage to $30, to pass the Green New Deal, and a one-time cancellation of all student loan debt. I wonder how many trillions of dollars that's going to cost the federal government. I wonder how many trillions the government is going to need to press and add to the current money supply to get that job done. I mean, how dumb. This next generation, you might say, is just a failure, but really, this next generation has been failed. Actually, we can make that point pretty well if we go back to her campaign ad. Well, I mean, this clip will play if I can get past the copyright music, otherwise I'll have to just read the transcript or something.
I did what they told me. I went to college. I got a master's degree. I ended up living in my car. I did what they told me. Protests, letters, phone calls. Nothing changed.
This is what I mean by this generation of woke socialist incompetence aren't necessarily failures, but society has failed them. Our education system, parents, culture, entertainment, our society has failed the next generation. Because all they did was they did what you told them, and now they can't think for themselves. They went to these dumbass schools and their brains were filled with all of this nonsense. They went $100,000 in debt to get a useless degree to live in their car and to become left-wing activists running for Congress on a campaign platform of telling homeless people to break into homes.
Billionaires tell us you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Well, that. They want you depressed and hopeless. Imagine I proposed a housing for all bill in Congress. Then imagine you, me, and a million of our friends took action and occupied empty houses nationwide. They couldn't ignore us. No one has ever done anything like this. That's why it's going to work. Are you ready?
We're gonna fight the man, dude. You know, it's kind of hard to describe it, but it's just something that I know. It's something that I feel because this is my generation, folks. I'm a millennial, and I've heard all of these talking points. I've met hundreds of these exact type of people. I was pretty close to even going down that route myself. Every millennial is the same. They all just think they're so smart. They use all these buzzwords like the 1%. You know, I hear the same things from all of these new age commies. They all have the same talking points. Oh, well, communism didn't actually fail in South America. It was actually the US's fault. The CIA and regime change. They all regurgitate the same talking points. They're all a bunch of big brain liberals. You know, such big brains that they went $100,000 in student loan debt to become a social worker or to make psychedelic music on SoundCloud. All such big brain leftoids who have the solution to every problem, and their solution to every problem is this country is rich, why can't we do this? Or this infamous clip.
All I'm saying is I've never seen a valid argument explaining why we can't just print more money.
Okay, so you know what I don't understand? This is what I don't understand. See this? See this? See that? This. This is worth $50? This is worth $5? This is the exact same piece of plastic. This is the same thing. We made up these arbitrary numbers. And then we said, we can't print more or else it'll be worthless. How about just don't let it be worthless?
And it's a vicious cycle, folks. They continue to advocate and campaign and vote for the same politicians and policies that keep exacerbating all of these problems, and then it always boils down to American imperialism and American capitalism, corporate greed and corporations and the 1%. None of it makes sense. It's totally incoherent. And the craziest part of all of this stuff is this might actually be the future of the Democrat Party. I mean, how ridiculous is that? You know, our society is falling apart when you're turning on the news and you're hearing discussions like this.
So I'm calling on all of us to think about the empty homes that are owned by corporations like BlackRock, like Zillow, like the banks, that are owned by those companies, those large corporations, and not being used for what they're intended for, which is actually housing people.
But if a bank owns a house that's foreclosed, someone that wants the house is able to buy it, but they can't buy it if there's a homeless person in there. What happens if they move in and some guy's just sleeping on the floor?
These are not the people that are going to lead us to more prosperous time, folks. The corporate greed, capitalism activists who can't seem to understand that the reason housing is becoming more and more unaffordable is because governments are printing trillions of dollars, and a lot of that money was loaned out at incredibly low interest rates to institutional and individual investors who bought everything up. It's not capitalism once again, it's the corruption of capitalism, it's government. If you can't even understand the basics, if you can't even dribble a ball, then what are you doing playing basketball? Go back on the sidelines and let the adults talk, please. These democratic socialists for America are really another breed. They are something else. Sometimes I wonder, was the baby boomer generation like this and then they grew up? Or is this just my generation? I mean, it's embarrassing. Boomers, truly. You guys aren't perfect, and a lot of boomer parents are actually kind of responsible for what's going on right now. But still, nonetheless, I apologize for my generation. That's what I got for you guys, though. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, a comment, subscribe, share the video as much as possible. We are still shadow banned by the YouTube algorithm. I'm going to get back to work. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.